Rome. The name itself brings to mind images of emperors, mighty legions, and grand arenas. For centuries, it was the heart of an empire that stretched across the known world, a city that shaped laws, languages, and cultures in ways we still feel today. But every great story has a beginning, and Rome's is one of the most famous and dramatic tales in all of history. It is not a story of careful planning or quiet beginnings. Instead, it is a story filled with gods, kings, betrayal, and two very special baby boys. This is the story of Romulus and Remus, the legendary founders of the Eternal City. The tale begins not in Rome, but in a nearby city called Alba Longa. The rightful king, Numitor, was overthrown by his cruel brother, Amulius. To make sure Numitor's family could never reclaim the throne, Amulius forced the king's daughter, Rhea Silvia, to become a Vestal virgin, sworn to never have children. But the god Mars had other plans. He visited Rhea Silvia, and soon she gave birth to twin boys, Romulus and Remus. When the evil king Amulius discovered the babies, he was furious. He ordered a servant to take the twins and drown them in the Tiber River, hoping to get rid of them for good. But fate, or perhaps the river god himself, intervened. The servant, taking pity on the infants, placed them in a basket and set it afloat on the river instead of drowning them. The river's waters were high from a flood, and the basket gently drifted downstream until it came to rest at the base of a fig tree on the bank. The cries of the hungry babies attracted a she-wolf, a creature sacred to the god Mars. Instead of harming the twins, the she-wolf miraculously cared for them, nursing them with her own milk. A woodpecker, another of Mars's sacred animals, also brought them food, protecting the boys until they were discovered. Eventually, the twins were found by a shepherd named Faustulus. He took the boys home to his wife, and they raised them as their own sons. Romulus and Remus grew up to be strong natural leaders, unaware of their royal blood. They lived a simple life, leading bands of young shepherds and protecting their flocks, but their noble heritage could not stay hidden forever. One day, after a fight with another group of shepherds, Remus was captured and taken before the very man who had tried to have them killed years ago, King Amulius. This event would set in motion a chain of events that would lead to the founding of the world's greatest city. When Faustulus learned that Remus had been taken, he knew he had to reveal the truth to Romulus. He told him the story of the basket, the river, and the she-wolf, explaining that he and Remus were the grandsons of the deposed King Numitor. Filled with a sense of justice and destiny, Romulus gathered his shepherd followers and marched on Alba Longa. He freed his brother, and together they led an uprising against their wicked great-uncle. They killed Amulius and rightfully restored their grandfather Numitor to the throne. The city celebrated their return, and the twins were hailed as heroes for their bravery and leadership. Having restored order in their ancestral home, the twins decided they did not want to wait to inherit a kingdom. They wanted to build a city of their own. They returned to the place where the she-wolf had found them, the 7 hills by the Tiber River. This spot held a special meaning for them, a place where their lives were saved by the gods. They decided this would be the perfect location for their new city. However, they immediately ran into a problem. They could not agree on which of the 7 hills to build upon. Romulus favored the Palatine Hill, while Remus preferred the Aventine Hill. To settle their dispute, they decided to look for a sign from the gods, a practice known as augury. They would watch the sky for birds, and whoever saw the most vultures would be chosen by the gods to be the founder and king. Remus, standing on his chosen hill, was the first to see a sign, a flight of 6 vultures. He celebrated, thinking he had won, but moments later Romulus, from his position on the Palatine Hill, saw a flight of 12 vultures. A fierce argument broke out. Remus argued he saw his birds first, but Romulus insisted his larger number meant he had the gods' true favor. The argument turned tragic. In a fit of rage over the dispute and to show his authority, Romulus began digging a trench and building a wall around the Palatine Hill, declaring it the boundary of his new city. Remus, mocking his brother's small wall, jumped over it. This act of defiance was the final straw. Enraged that his brother had violated his sacred boundary, Romulus killed Remus. Standing alone over his brother's body, he declared, "So perish all who ever cross my walls." On that day, April 21st, 753 BC, the city was founded and named Rome, after its first triumphant and tragic king. This dramatic story of wolves and warring brothers is wonderfully exciting, but is it what really happened? Historians and archaeologists have a rather different story to tell. Their version is less about gods and destiny, and more about the slow, practical development of a community. According to the evidence they have unearthed, the true founding of Rome was not a single event that happened on a specific day. Instead, it was a gradual process. The famous Seven Hills were, for a long time, home to several small, separate villages. These were not grand cities, but simple settlements of farmers and shepherds living in basic huts. These early settlers were likely Latins, people who spoke a common language and shared a similar culture. They chose the hills for good reasons. Media group, defensible hilltop locations in Rome, ancient Roman village landscapes, Tiber River near Rome at distribute equally. The location was easily defensible against raids. The nearby Tiber River provided a reliable source of water for drinking and for their crops. The river was also a natural crossroads for trade and travel, connecting the people of the coast with those living further inland. Over a long period, perhaps a century or more, these small villages on the different hills began to grow. They started to trade with each other, share resources, and eventually merge together for mutual protection and prosperity. The crucial change happened when these separate hilltop communities agreed to drain the marshy valley that lay between them. This swampy ground, once unusable, became a central meeting point. This drained area would later become the famous Roman Forum, the heart of the city's political, commercial, and social life. By building this shared space, the villages effectively became one larger, unified entity. This process was not the work of one heroic founder like Romulus, but the collective effort of many generations of ordinary people working together to build a better community. It was a slow, organic growth, not a dramatic founding, so the historical reality is quite different from the grand legend. There were no divine twins rescued by a she-wolf. There was no dramatic fight between brothers to decide the city's fate. Instead, Rome grew from humble beginnings, born out of the practical needs of small, independent communities that slowly banded together. The archaeological evidence, such as the remains of post holes for simple huts found on the Palatine Hill, supports this more modest story. It tells a tale not of a single king's ambition, but of a community's gradual evolution into the city that would one day rule an empire. If the historical account is so different, why do we all remember the story of Romulus and Remus? The answer lies in the power of a good story. The myth is exciting and memorable. It's filled with action, divine intervention, and family drama, all the elements of a great tale. The Romans themselves loved this story. For them, it provided a heroic and almost divine origin. It suggested that Rome was not just any city, it was a city chosen by the gods, founded by the son of Mars himself. This narrative gave them a powerful sense of identity and destiny, a belief that they were meant for greatness from the very beginning. The legend also served a political purpose. The story of Romulus, a strong and decisive leader who founded his city through strength and even bloodshed, justified Rome's own aggressive expansion and its warrior culture. It sent a clear message. Romans were fierce, determined, and descended from a founder who would let nothing stand in his way. This was a much more inspiring story than one about farmers draining a swamp. The myth gave Roman citizens a shared history to be proud of, connecting them to a legendary past and encouraging a sense of patriotism and loyalty to the state, which was incredibly useful for its leaders. In contrast, the historical truth, while fascinating to archaeologists, is much less glamorous. The idea of small villages slowly merging lacks the epic sweep of the founding myth. People often prefer stories that feature clear heroes and villains, dramatic conflicts, and a sense of higher purpose. The real story of Rome's founding is more complex and human scale, driven by practical needs like safety and trade, rather than divine prophecy. The legend simplifies this complex history into a single, powerful narrative that is easy to tell, remember, and passed down through generations, which is why it has overshadowed the historical facts for so long. Ultimately, both the myth and the reality are important for understanding Rome. The legend tells us what the Romans believed about themselves and how they wanted to be seen by the world. It reveals their values, their ambitions, and their character. The history, on the other hand, shows us the real-world foundations upon which that great civilization was built. It reminds us that even the mightiest empires can grow from the humblest of beginnings. By knowing both stories, we get a richer, more complete picture of how Rome began and why its legacy continues to capture our imagination to this very day on July 28, 2025.